And then when you exercise or in your drive to work, you listen to yourself talking to yourself audibly. I put a music bed. I put U2 as a music bed underneath my self-talk. And when I run, I listen to me telling myself how I should be thinking. So I hear my voice until pretty much I am repeating as I run what I hear myself saying. Then it becomes self-talk. When it becomes self-talk, those are my thoughts. And we all know that thoughts produce feelings, and feelings produce actions, and actions produce results. And that's how you're renewed. That's how you're transformed by the renewing of your mind. You literally have to take control of how you're going to think.
Hi, my name is Evan Herrman, and I'm documenting my journey on becoming the best version of myself while learning how to be an entrepreneur and developing the successful habits that are necessary to get and keep me there. If you want to come alongside of me and make this journey together, we'll be listening and learning from some of the world's greatest mentors in the areas that matter most: faith, family, finances, friendship, fitness, and fun. So join me on the Whole Person Podcast. Today we have a great man in the name of Jason Frenn. He has held more than 75 international crusades where more than 7 million people have heard the presentation of the gospel. He has made more than 700,000 first-time decisions for people who have come to know Christ. He is a best-selling author of multiple books, and his most recent work is called The 7 Prayers That God Always Answers. Jason, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much, Evan. It's an honor to be here. I admire what you're doing. I couldn't be more thrilled to be a part of this because I know our audience is going to glean some great things, which they've already gleaned from your program. But if I can contribute, that's an honor for me.
Well, you are. I'm really excited to have you on the show because, specifically speaking, you're one of the real first ministers that we've got to have on the show. One of the first evangelists, so to say. And this podcast, while it's not specifically about preaching the gospel, it very much has a Christian undertone to it because that's the beliefs I adhere to. Mm-hmm. And just kind of jumping into some of life's hardest questions in general, we all have ways that we're used to doing things that are like our default settings.
Correct.
And one of the things that I've realized in my own life is it's hard to break out of the default settings and create new ones. And so whether it be in your faith or in physical health, what advice would you give someone to break some of their default settings?
That's an excellent question, Evan. I believe that the human being is changeable. Much more difficult to change animals, especially animals that are older, like a dog that's 10 years of age. You can train an animal, you can train a dog to do various things, but the human being is capable of breaking those destructive patterns or those default settings throughout our entire life. That's the way God engineered us. It doesn't matter what your background is. The human brain hasn't really developed much more over the last 10,000 years. And in that, we have a keen ability to learn and learn new patterns and learn new things, as well as breaking those destructive patterns. The first step is really to identify the underlying tones and take notice of the fact that you want to change. Some people say, yes, I want to change, but until they can deal with the internal struggle of making sure their will is unified, change is impossible. You have to have a unified will in order for you to attain the change. That's why court-ordered anger management, it doesn't really work.
Right.
And the reason why it doesn't work is because the will is divided. People who are hooked on porn, people who are hooked on alcoholism, people who are struggling with depression or any type of vice or any type of pattern, if there's a part of them that enjoys that, they have to figure out a way to unify their will to want to be free, and then they can experience the process towards freedom. But that's the first key. The first key is having a unified will where you're all in. If you're not all in, you're always going to continue with that struggle.
So basically, your actions have to align with your intention.
Yeah, well, the issue really is to make sure that your intentions are unified, right? You want to make sure that there's a part of you, or if not most or all of you, that really detests the things that you want to break. If you're 50-50, then you're going to have this ongoing duel. Then you can't even get to action, right? So you have to figure out a way to make sure that your will is unified so that you can put into place the intentions and the actions, because we all know that actions produce results.
Right.
But you're not going to be able to do any actions until you're making sure every part of you is rowing in the right direction.
Okay, so I want to ask the question beneath the question here. And it's, you said something where even if there's a small part of you that enjoys it, it's going to be much more difficult to change a habit unless if you detest pretty much all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to take one example in my life. I want to have a healthier lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
I occasionally am working out.
Mm-hmm.
Recently had knee surgery, so I'm getting back into the routine. But here's the thing. I just downed a foot-long sandwich earlier today, And so like while I want health, I'm very much addicted to food. I'm very much addicted to cravings and the endorphins or the neurological things that fire when I taste that sandwich or have that hamburger. And one of my big ones has been soda. As of what's today, the 12th, I've been soda free for 12 days, which is huge for me.
Right.
How those are things that are meant to keep us addicted and coming back to them.
That's right.
So how do I break that?
Well, Paul says, and this is applicable to corporate CEOs, to C-level management, President of the United States, to the poorest person on the face of the planet. This concept is true. Paul says, the things that I want to do, I don't do. And the very things that I want to do, I don't do. So even Paul is alluding to this conflict of will, right? He understands that until you can get all of you rowing in the right direction, you're always going to be rowing in circles, right? And it's going to continue this habitual pattern of wanting to break free, but a part of you is liking it, right? And that's the problem. So you have to visualize the following illustration. Back in the 1960s and before that time, when you made a phone call, you called an operator, and the operator in a switchboard would physically take your cable and plug it into the number that you're trying to call. And we've all seen pictures of that. We can't even imagine that now.
Right.
It's all done by computers. But back then, they literally took your cable and plugged it into it. Sometimes the operator would plug the cable into the wrong slot. And that's why when we would call, the person on the other end says, no, you got the wrong number. Okay, well, that very rarely happens to us now. Occasionally it does. But that's what's happening in the mind. We are interpreting the things that literally do us damage as things that are giving us pleasure. We are enjoying the chocolate. We are enjoying these things, but we don't see the long-term repercussions, which are truly painful. So we are, in essence, being plugged into the wrong socket. What you have to do, as crazy as it sounds, is you have to take and reinterpret the things that are good for you in the long term as things that are pleasure. So you have to look at broccoli as if it were chocolate. So when your mind sees the broccoli, you need to be seduced by that broccoli. When you see egg whites, right, instead of a cheese omelet, you need to be seduced by the longevity that those egg whites are going to give you, and instead of the double or triple cheese omelet, right, instead of the fried bacon or the bacon grease. You have to be able to look at the healthy things of life and literally be seduced in the same way that the things that are currently giving you pleasure are having an impact on your life. Is it easy? No. Is it possible? Absolutely. Absolutely. And these are all triggers that happen in our mind. So We are literally transformed by the renewing of our mind. And I know that's sort of a longer explanation, but that in essence is the trick to moving past those things that are seducing you in terms of food, so that you can see the longevity and the benefits of things that are good for you.
I want to come back to the renewing of your mind part here, because I know I have a similar question to that. But have you ever heard of the idea of find your why?
Yes.
So that is a concept that I personally have struggled with, and out of all the coaching sessions and out of mentorships and trainings, find your why, your big motivation, the catalyst that this is why. And so I found that why, and it didn't help. It wasn't that thing. So then I dug deeper, and then I found a new why, and then I found a new why when that didn't work. And I kept digging and digging and digging. And even now, when I look at my why, I still struggle with that concept, or that being my iron fist hit the table. Like, I'm not doing this, or I'm doing this because. How do we move towards a place where this idea of your why is effective? Because I know a lot of people that feel like they're in the same boat where they come up with this really great why, but then life looks the same.
Right. I spoke at the Crystal Cathedral probably 6 times on Hour of Power, and I remember walking into the meeting with Robert Schuller, and most of your audience is probably too young to know who he is. But he asked me what the upcoming message title was. And I said, well, I'm vacillating between 2 things. One of the titles is The Power to Overcome Anything. And the other title is, and I kind of laughed, I said, this is kind of ridiculous, but is your why bigger than your butt? And he said, I like that better. and butt obviously is spelled with 1 T, right? So is your why bigger than any excuse you can come up with? See, that's the key. The key isn't just coming up with a why, a reason to do what you want to do. The strategy behind it is you got to come up with a reason to do something that is bigger than any other excuse you can come up with. So in my case, losing weight, which is not the number one priority, getting into a healthy condition is the key. So applying, since that has been the theme up to this point, I've always struggled with my weight. I always struggled for year after year after year. I was yo-yo up and down, 252, 205, 198, up to 245. I mean, it was ebb and flow 50 pounds. I walk into the doctor, and I'm 30 years of age, and he says to me, Jason, your blood pressure is 170 over 100, and you're 30. Your cholesterol is 297. He said, buddy, if you don't get your act together, you're going to be dead by the time you're 40. All of a sudden, my why became, I want to live. I don't want to die. So that why wasn't, boy, I'd like to get in really good shape for homecoming, or, I got an interview coming up, or I'm getting married. Those are goals. But once you reach the goal or the date, you have no why that carries you beyond that. So you have to sort of marry your why with something that is longer term and based upon something that is very serious. When it comes to a financial why, for example, perhaps your why might be, my parents aren't going to take care of me. My kids aren't going to take care of me. The reality is I could be living out on the streets unless I get my financial act together. And you look at people who are living under bridges or living along the jogging path of a river, and you think, well, I could live in a tent. And that scares me so much that I'm willing to have a big enough why to do something about it now that carries me for the next 40 years. Those are the kinds of whys that you need to be tied into every day. When I just ran today. I ran 5 miles today. And it wasn't a choice for me, because I tell myself, dude, you're going to die if you do not do what you got to do. Or you can live. What do you want to do? It's much bigger than any excuse I can come up with. And that's why I do it. And so that's what I would say to our viewing audience and those who are also listening through the audio. is tie your why to something much bigger than any excuse you can come up with.
So going back to Romans 12:2, which is be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Within Christianity, I've heard that a lot and put that into practice. But I want to hear what you have to say. How does a person actually transform their mind by renewing it? What does that process look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, the brain can be rewired. And when it's rewired, it's physically changed. The physiology of the mind changes when we rewire it. The pathways change. They say that people who are addicted to pornography, if they stop, it takes almost 18 months for those pathways to sort of be rewritten.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting, the process. It's sort of like when you walk through the snow, you tend to walk in the same patterns in the snow because you don't want to walk through a foot of snow every time. You don't want to make new patterns. So the mind just looks for the regular patterns. What the renewing of the mind takes place is that you're having a snowfall, all the old tracks disappear, and now you're going to form new tracks that are better. The first key is to, in my opinion, rewrite your thought patterns. You have to be intentional by doing that. The reason why no one, in the second half of that verse, is then we will be able to test and prove what the good, pleasing will of God is. The reason why nobody knows what the will of God is because their minds have not been renewed. And the reason is because there's too many competing ideas in the mind. So what I've done, which works if you're disciplined, I take a piece of paper and I write out what my self-talk or what my thinking should be. And I write it within a biblical format. For example, God loves me. I'm a child of God. There's hope for the future. I am a decent person. I'm a loving husband. I'm a loving father. It doesn't matter if I am those things, right? Who cares what you feel? Who cares what your self-image is? If you know what the correct self-image should be, then write that, right? I, Evan, am a wonderful talk show. I have the #1 talk show in America. And I would write all these things down, right? And then I would record those things into an audio program. It could be GarageBand, Pro Tools, whatever you got. And then when you exercise or in your drive to work, you listen to yourself talking to yourself audibly. I put a music bed. I put U2 as a music bed underneath my self-talk. And when I run, I listen to me telling myself how I should be thinking. So I hear my voice until pretty much I am repeating as I run what I hear myself saying. Then it becomes self-talk. When it becomes self-talk, those are my thoughts. And we all know that thoughts produce feelings, and feelings produce actions, and actions produce results. And that's how you're transformed by the renewing of your mind. You literally have to take control of how you're going to think.
That's awesome. Do you know who Dr. Shad Helmstetter is?
Yes.
He was on one of our previous podcasts. And so what you're saying and what he's saying, very, very, very good. And I just thank you for sharing that for sure. So within life, I've seen instant miracles.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen instant healings. I've seen people instantly set free from things. And in my personal life, I've never received instant healing that I remember, or an instant breakthrough of something. I've seen small financial blessings that have helped, but never one thing that just course changed everything. And, in one of your previous messages, I heard you share this, the process of a miracle versus an instant miracle.
Mm-hmm.
And that really intrigued me. And I wanted to know what you meant by the process of a miracle versus an instant miracle.
Not to get too theologically profound, but we find
let's
that,
do it.
All right, let's do it. We find as missionaries, those of us who work around the globe, that instantaneous miracles, inexplicable miracles, things that people coming back from the dead, tumors disappearing, the people born blind receiving their sight, those kinds of things happen on the very cutting edge of where the gospel is breaking new ground in a country or in a culture. That's true in the New Testament as well. We don't know why it doesn't happen in, let's say, First Baptist Church of Dallas, where they've had a work established there for, decades and generation after generation. There are Christians there. We don't know what God's thinking is of why he does these incredible eye-opening things at the very cutting edge where the gospel is breaking new ground. However, we do divide miracles into two categories. One is instantaneous, like I suggested, and the other is a process. We find that emotional miracles, we find that depression types of miracles, anxiety, people being delivered from those kinds of hurts over the past, many times it's through a process that takes, let's say, a month or 2 months or 6 months or maybe even a year or longer. And the reason is because God likes to use community to help us through that healing process. Without his healing process, people can eventually wind up under a bridge. So that's why I think seeking God is so important. Making God a part of your life is so important, because he never abandons those who are suffering, ever, on any condition. The instantaneous miracles tend to be those a little bit more like physical miracles, financial miracles, the things that we love, right?
Right.
Although God is still at work through the processes, so the timing looks like it's instantaneous, but he's had things in the works for a lot of time. What we have to understand is that God can do it either way, and it's still miraculous, because a miracle is God's divine intervention and in the normal daily routines of people. And without his intervention, then things are usually disastrous.
Mm-hmm. I'm really looking forward to this year and what it brings, because barring any really close family tragedy, this year, if nothing even major happens good, it's still going to be better than what my last year was. So, I'll just quickly share with you. So, for the past several years, I'd probably say the last 10, I've struggled with anxiety, not really realizing it was anxiety until probably about a little over a year ago. But get this, last year, okay, so we take my son to the ER. We thought he needed an appendectomy. Praise God, it was gas lock. Felt foolish, a lot of money at the ER. Right. I injured my knee. I need to have knee surgery. My wife's pregnant, and then we lose the baby 12 weeks into the pregnancy. So that caused 2 ER trips. And then we had another ER visit, a car wreck, our fault. Everyone was okay, still financial. Then 2 days after that, our only operating vehicle broke down for good. And then there was a girl that we really felt called to sponsor her surgery in Africa. She was in Uganda. She had a very bad infected foot. And so we sponsored that surgery. We had no business sponsoring that financially. But it's like, if we don't, then she will probably die. So we sponsored it, and she died on the operating table. Oh, man. And then in November, the week before Thanksgiving, my belly starts hurting, and I think it's just gas. There's no way I'm going back to the emergency room, because my son just had gas lock, 5-6 months ago. But the next morning, I was just like, I probably should go. And sure enough, I had my appendix out.
Oh, wow. So
we had 7 major financial hits, emotional hits, all within a year. Even one of those is fairly hard to depending on your financial status, to recover from. If you're and so, but we had 7 of them. And several things happened. One, through the process, my finances actually got better. it wasn't till September. There's some stuff that God showed me to do differently. And so we did, and we started seeing some progress there. But then here's the other thing. While I had anxiety through it, I also learned that peace, true peace from Jesus, true peace from God, is in spite of circumstances.
That's right.
That just because I have peace and my circumstances are good, that's not real peace.
Right.
And so this has been a long process.
Yeah.
And through it, the struggle with anxiety that I've had for 10 years has, I want to say, has or is very close to being fully healed because of the process of that. And I really didn't think about, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because I didn't think about the healing of anxiety and understanding that peace is in spite of circumstances. Well, I knew that the last part, but the healing of the anxiety came through when you were talking and you shared about anxiety, and my flags went off, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is something that has happened in my life over this year. This is something I can say that actually has been radically affected for the better.
Wow.
Despite everything.
It's absolutely amazing the testimonies that I hear of people like yourself who say that through a process they have been delivered from anxiety. It's interesting that the enemy uses these circumstances with an attempt to enhance one's anxiety, make people feel oppressed, like they're living under a shadow, try to get them to commit suicide. Hopefully people are going to increase their cutting, all those kinds of things. And yet God's divine intervention through this, and it's almost impossible to pinpoint where it happens. That's the other thing that I've noticed. People say, it could have been this time when we prayed that things started, or it might be this book, or it might be that. We're not quite sure where it began. But in the same way, in many ways, like salvation, someone is asked, when did God begin to work in your life so that you would become a believer? It's impossible to pinpoint that point on the continuum, yet God knows. And so I believe there are people that are watching who are going to hear your story, and they're going to take these concepts, they're going to open their hearts, and they're going to say, God, I may or may not know you, but I'm willing to accept your peace that gives me all understanding. And I want you to heal me from this anxiety, this depression, or I want you to carry me through this process. And in a month, 2 months, 5 months, 10 months, they're going to look back and say, wow, it's amazing the transformation that's taken place in my life. And it was God that divinely intervened in their lives.
That's awesome. It's really funny that you say a lot of people don't know that pinpoint. I can tell you when the light came on for me, only because it happened while I was doing a podcast, which is really ironic because it's the whole person podcast, and a lot of the podcast is me just documenting my journey of personal growth and development and sharing it with others who are like-minded and on the same journey. And it came from when I had someone on who was talking about just the anxiety, the stress, the depression, all comes from this image that we create of ourselves. And when we create this perfect image of ourselves, not only is it self-hatred, but it's also idolatry. And it was from that moment that I want to say God started clearing things and showing me about peace and stuff like that. So the reason why I added that last part in there is because if you are interested, there's a show about it. You can go find it. But you are absolutely right, Jason. Like, the majority of the times when God's making changes in my life, I can't pinpoint a time. I can't pinpoint an exact conversation because there's been so many conversations that God brought. There's so many steps. And I think that goes to expectation as well, going to the instant miracle aspect, is because sometimes in our culture we're so instantaneous that we want it now.
Right.
And if we don't see that, flash of lightning, that instantaneous thing, it's almost as if it invalidates the process when it
Right.
really isn't.
Right.
And I'm sharing all this not from a standpoint of been there, done that. I'm talking right now because I'm figuring this out on the spot.
Sure.
And oh, wow.
Most anxiety happens because of something in the past or something anticipating in the future. And we either have not dealt with things in our past, or we are mind reading, or we're forecasting the future, which is a horrible habit. We do things called mind reads. We get involved in these relationships and we just automatically assume that the other person is thinking this way. And we put words and thoughts in their heart that don't actually exist. And so we forecast or we reinterpret the past, and it causes such agitation. And really, it's God helping putting Humpty Dumpty back together again, And
Right.
sometimes that is definitely a process. And the cool thing is that, for those that are watching this podcast or listening to it, you don't have to have all the answers. If you can simply open your heart and say, I will trust God to lead me through this process, He will. He's never asked us to be the most intelligent people on the planet, but He just simply wants us to trust and to place our faith in Him.
100%. You said something that kind of sparked my interest. We worry about the future that can cause anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of the term vision boards?
No, I have not.
So a vision board is like a board that you create with pictures or words or things on it that you want to see in your life, goals, aspirations. And so I have a vision board. I wrote down my business goals on it. I wrote down some financial and personal or even some possession stuff that I want to see. And I'm seeing some of this stuff come to pass, which is really, really neat. And then the other aspect is some of my goals I set up, I look at my business goals, I set really high expectations. Chances are I'm probably not going to hit those.
Right.
But I would really like to. And if I did, it would change my family, life. And this is my struggle in that aspect. I want to have goals. I want to have desires. I want to have aspirations to strive towards for the future. But also I'm looking into the future, and those things can also create anxiety.
Yep.
Can create a feeling of lack. So how do I reconcile the goals in attaining and moving forward and having something to drive you, but also not to allow that to create anxiety, to create a feeling of lack or desperation or just not enough?
Zig Ziglar was my mentor. Tom, his son, and I are good friends. I'm a Ziglar trainer. I teach the Ziglar Speakers Institute. I'm one of their corporate speakers as well. And we do a number of different things that we train corporations and individuals. One particular thing that we do is goal setting. The goal setting program is an excellent, and I mean excellent program. And we teach that you divide your goals into 3 different categories: the short term, medium range, and then the long term. You need to have some pie in the sky goals, not things that are impossible, but a real good stretch, because those are the kinds of things that keep you moving in the right direction. Financial independence, for example. So one goal might be to retire with $10 million. It might be a pie in the sky kind of a deal. Not impossible though, not at your age. It would have been impossible for somebody living in the 50s, but for somebody born as a millennial, for example, that is doable. It's a stretch, but it's doable. So, having that goal kind of over the horizon, you don't have to see the ways to get to it over the horizon. You just have to be able to get to the horizon, and then you'll be able to take the next few steps. Now, the intermediate goals are doable but they're within, let's say, a month to a year. So you want to have those, and you want to have those planned out. And of course, the short range goals are today through a month, let's say. And the reason why you have the three categories is because as you attain the shorter goals and the intermediate goals, it gives you the confidence, and it's still moving you in the direction where your self-talk is going to be positive because you're accomplishing things. But that long-term goal is still out there, but that's still moving you towards the horizon, which is so important. That in a nutshell is what we teach, but I highly recommend that people break up their categories. And then, of course, there's a number of questions you want to ask. Is it beneficial for everyone involved? Is this particular goal congruent with the rest of my life goals? Is it congruent with my golden thread, who I was born to be? What my DNA is as a individual, someone who contributes to society, or is it congruent or incongruent? Does my immediate family say, yay, this is a great, goal. This is a wonderful opportunity. Or is it going to detract from them? Is it going to distract from my other goals? So there's a series of questions you want to make sure that are on target. For example, I want to walk to the moon. Now that is not possible. You might want to rephrase that, like, I would like to visit the moon in a 3D experience. Well, that's doable, but not walk to the moon. So you might want to restructure the goals and figure out what the essence of the goal is. Is the goal having $10 million, or is the goal being financially independent? Because you don't have to have the 10 million to be financially independent. What you need to do is redefine what financial independence means for you and what it will mean for you at the net present value in the future. And that's how you can revamp your goals so that they're becoming a little bit more realistic. That's what I would suggest.
Gotcha. So I believe, and I'm sure you do as well, that God is the creator of all things through Jesus. How do we open ourselves up to God to receive healing and his workmanship in the areas of faith, family, finances, friendship, fitness, and even fun?
Right. Like I said, as a Ziegler trainer, I'm sure that you have defined the areas of life maybe the same, maybe slightly different, but there's a wheel of life that's been around for, psychologists have talked about it for more than 6 decades. And it's broken up into the spiritual, mental. It's also dealing with family, finance, personal, your career, and if I haven't already mentioned it, your physical being. So you got 7 different areas. And the question is, how can you experience healing in all those areas? You want to make sure that the spokes of that wheel are fully inflated. So you rate yourself on the spokes of that wheel, and hopefully you're coming out at 9s and 10s in every category. Most people are not that way. Most people are like this. Their wheel is really jagged and their ride is really bumpy. So what can I do to bring healing? How can God help me to inflate my tire so that I got a smooth ride in life? Well, what I do is I pray over every area and I say, Lord, show me the way to your godly prosperity. I'm very careful with that term because I know there's a lot of danger with that, but everyone wants to be healthy, everyone wants to be happy, and everyone wants to be reasonably prosperous. I've never met somebody, and I've been to Cuba 15 times, Evan. I've never met anyone in Cuba who said, no, I'd rather be poor. Everybody wants to be reasonably prosperous. Everybody wants to be happy, and everyone wants to be healthy. Okay, how can I align this prayer with God? God, show me the way that I can attain these things in all 7 areas of my life. And so you begin to study those areas through books, through podcasts like this. You begin to pray, Lord, bring healing into my life physically. Help me, Lord, today, not every day. Help me today to overcome the foot-long sandwiches. Help me to say no to soda today, not forever. There's great wisdom in the Alcoholics Anonymous prayer. Lord, give me the wisdom to decipher between what I can and cannot change. Give me the power to change today. not forever, just today. And every morning you pray that prayer. God, give me the victory in these areas today. I don't recommend that anyone says, I want to be set free for the next 50 years. I want to be healed for the next 50. No, I just pray for today. Give me the victory today. And after a year, you look back and say, wow, I've been walking in victory for a year. And with that comes confidence. And with that comes more faith. It's also important to listen to this sort of podcast, for example. I would subscribe to this podcast to tell everybody you need to subscribe to this podcast. And the reason is because faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word of God. Now, that does not mean sermons. It can mean sermons, but people think when they read that it's talking about Bible reading. That's not what it means. Paul wrote that. It was a letter to the Romans, and there was no Bible, right? There was no Bible. What does the word mean? The word rhema means spoken word, which is inspired by God, and it also means report, right? So faith comes by hearing the reports of God. So what happens when you hear a testimony of someone who lost 50 pounds? Man, you get motivated to lose 50 pounds, right?
Right.
What happens when you hear about someone who, I was a drug dealer and I went to Teen Challenge and just turned my life around? Well, if you're struggling with drugs, what happens to your faith? It rises. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing the reports of God. Interesting when you hear stories of people being healed. You hear people flipping houses. When you hear stories of the stock market, and the negative is also true, right? Or hearing the destructive reports also destroys faith. So you want to listen to these kinds of teachings that you're doing and other books over the 7 areas, because that will inspire your faith and help to increase your confidence in those areas. And with that comes greater breakthrough. I hope our time together has been very fruitful, and I hope that our audience is greatly benefited by these things.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Evan. It's been an honor.
Take care. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you would, I'd greatly appreciate you subscribing, as well as rating and even leaving us an objective review. It helps us with our ratings and spreading the message of the Whole Person podcast. And now, may the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. Thank you guys so much for listening today. Take care, and God bless.